I am Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center in downtown Indianapolis. Welcome to another one-to-one with Bill Simmons. Today, I am with the incomparable Jennifer Blackmer, professor at Ball State, a wonderful playwright. She has adapted Margaret Atwood's novels for the stage. And for about the last year and a half or so, we have been involved in helping to develop your play Predictor, which is about Meg Crane, who came up with the concept of the home pregnancy test.
Yes.
Little side note, she recently popped up as somebody I might like to friend on Facebook, and now Meg Crane and I are Facebook friends, which I find to be hilarious.
Just so you know, she posts amazing things, right? So she went through a phase in the spring where she was doing little diorama setups with Peeps.
Oh, so that sounds awesome.
So if you scroll back through her timeline, you'll see an Easter parade with Peeps.
I am on that tonight while I am listening to the Start With Art thing for the Arts Council. I am going to be totally doing that.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, she's still she's a graphic artist, and that's how she got her start, and that's also how she came up with the idea of the home pregnancy test. She was working with this pharmaceutical company as a graphic artist, but she still is a working graphic artist. And so she does her own Christmas cards, and occasionally you'll see her cartoons and things like that pop up, and it's pretty awesome. So she's great.
We've jumped right into Meg Crane, and we jumped into the play Predictor that made a big splash in Atlanta at the National New Play Network Showcase last December. We were all set to make it part of the season we should be in the midst of right now, and of course the pandemic has put all that on hiatus. But let's talk a little bit about Predictor, Meg Crane, how that play how it came into your world, how it came into being through you.
I love plays that deal with science and technology and discovery. So I've been attracted to those kinds of stories forever. So the first play I ever wrote, which seems like decades ago now, was about Lisa Meitner, who's the physicist who discovered that we were splitting the atom back in the 40s, and she was a Jewish person living in Germany. And, when you read her own letters, that's what she says. But she was partnering with Otto Hahn, and she had to go into exile. And so they were writing letters back and forth. And Hahn wound up winning the Nobel Prize for splitting the atom, but he did not credit Meitner.
Oh,
and it was only in the 70s and 80s that scholarship began to acknowledge her own contributions to that discovery. So it's things like that. It's stories of women in science, in industry, who are doing wonderful things and don't get credited because of the time period, because of whatever issues that are going on at the time. And plus, I love working through history, because I think there's something about looking at the events through a historical lens that reveal a lot about where we are today. And so this was a couple of years ago. I was middle of summer sitting on my back porch reading the New York Times, and an article popped up and it said, should women be trusted with their own pregnancy tests? And I was like, what is this? So I read the article, and it was Meg Crane's story. And essentially what had happened was the writer, Peggy Kennedy, who does this amazing series with the Times called Who Made That, had pulled up the idea of doing a little bit of research into the home pregnancy test. It's something that it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so her series, Who Made That, did some digging, and the original article that she wrote said that the home pregnancy test was first used in America in the early 70s, and it was the EPT test, and it was Insight Pharmaceuticals. And so Meg read this article and was like, wait a minute, I, Meg, made the home pregnancy test. And so she reached out, she contacted the Times, they put her in touch with Pagan, and Pagan's like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this, because there was nothing about this in any of the literature. So this article that I read was not exactly a retraction, but more of an exploration of the actual invention, if you will, the home pregnancy test. And it was her idea. She was a designer working at Organon Pharmaceuticals in 1967, and a friend of hers took her on a little tour through the lab, and she saw the pregnancy tests that the company was running, and they were all on the wall on top of a mirror. And he explained to her how they worked. And she's like, why can't women do this on their own? I mean, it was a basic question that then led her on this journey, on this crazy journey, through the developing of the idea, through the making of a prototype, through the arguing with the people in the company. It's a very sort of Mad Men story of the 60s, because she was the only woman involved in this entire thing.
That's how I describe it, as she's the Peggy Olson of the home pregnancy test.
Yes, exactly. And so she had to make a choice. And at the end of the action of the play, you know, she makes this choice, but ultimately the choice then kind of removes her from the history of the play, of the home pregnancy test. So the play for me was about revisiting that history, revisiting history in general, and asking ourselves what women were involved in, you know, the making of these things. And so I saw this article, I was immediately taken in. And I have a good friend and collaborator whom I worked with for many years now, Brian Nitzkin. He's based in Los Angeles, and he was responsible for me being able to adapt Margaret Atwood's book for the stage. And so we've had this partnership for a long time. And I sent him the article and I said, what do you think? And he likes to say originally my idea was for a musical. Jokes about that.
It probably could be.
It could be. You know, I've never written a musical before, so I was, you know, kind of itching to try something new, and he immediately responded. And typically, if an idea that I have resonates with him, he's right there. And he did. He responded within like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, however long it took him to read it. And he goes, yes, absolutely. Although I don't think it's a musical. And I was like, okay. And then he said, are you interested? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. And so in true Brian Nitzkin fashion, he started doing his magic. And a couple weeks later, I was in Los Angeles taking some meetings, and he calls me and he said, what are you doing on Friday? And I said, well, what do you want me to be doing on Friday? He said, I want you to be on a conference call with me and Meg Crane. And I was like, I thought you were just going to like try and option the article. And he goes, well, I went that route, and then I decided this would be more interesting. So he actually found Meg, tracked her down, put the two of us together, and we just hit it off. And she's, I mean, you've met her, she's phenomenal. And
Yeah,
so
she's one of those people who just, until you she's just very unassuming, and then you talk to her, and then you start getting these little tidbits, and before you know it, you realize you're in the presence of somebody who's really literally changed the world. And I think that is what is that's what I'm, as I've gotten older, those are the kinds of people that I am completely awestruck by, and I fan out on, I fan geek out on that kind of, because, you know, celebrity stuff is celebrity stuff, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. She changed the world, and those kinds of stories to me are so, and they feel really important to where we are now. You know, one person or a group of people really can change the world for the better if they're just determined to see it through. And I think there's a lot of inspiration that could be taken from somebody like Meg Crane for all of us.
Absolutely. And that was what I found immediately. I mean, from the first conversation we had, she's just, you know, forthright, honest, just very straightforward about everything. She does acknowledge what she did, but on the other hand, she's so gracious in telling the story in such a way that it acknowledges all of it, her being in a particular place and time, her having the courage to think differently about something and what that struggle was, particularly in 1967. Because there were a lot of folks, men folks who were working with her who didn't think it was a good idea, didn't believe in her, didn't trust her for whatever reason, thought they knew better, and basically tried to keep her in a corner, right? And so that's really the story of the play. The interesting thing is when we talked with her, Brian and I, the idea of it being a play was really, really interesting and intriguing to her. When the article came out, she immediately got, the phone calls from Hollywood about, oh, we want to tell your story and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that we were interested in a theatrical event and one that was a sort of positive, sort of celebratory look at this event, and a bit of a bit of a probing look into the history of it as well. I think all of those things, sort of the politics as well as the ability to create immediate relationships on stage in a theatrical context, were really interesting to her. And so she was immediately drawn into the idea that this could be a play, and we started talking. Had several phone interviews. I also sent her some written questions because I was interested in sort of seeing what her voice was on the page and how she wrote. And turns out, of course, she's a great writer. She actually sent me a couple short stories that she wrote, and I was like, these are really good.
That's
so,
awesome.
She really is very much a Renaissance woman. And so we just exchanged a lot of time with each other. We spent a lot of time with each other. And because of that, I felt very empowered when I began telling the story to really dig in and explore some of the issues and the conflicts. And throughout the process, there was this time where when I was working on the first draft, which, as you know, first drafts are always just bad. They're supposed to be, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I was working on the first draft and I was getting it all down, and she and I were talking about halfway through, and she goes, well, when can I see it? And I was like, not yet. And then I sort of went, radio silence for a while, and she was talking to Brian, but then we had to, at some point, obviously give it to her and say, okay, what do you think? And those were probably the scariest 2 days of my life.
Wow.
Because you've got this woman's life and you're telling her story. And she came back and she goes, well, I have notes. And I was like, oh, here we go. But her notes were great. They're like, I really like this line. I don't think he would have said it in just this way, or this moment was slightly different, and let me tell you about it. And then, we sort of talked through it, but the structure was great. She loved it. She loved the humor. She loved it. And that was the most gratifying moment I think I've ever had as a theater artist. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. When we workshopped this in the summer of 2019, and then submitted it to be considered for an NPN showcase. Now, I just remember being struck, even in the earliest draft I saw, by the combination of both intimate scenes between two people and the theatricality of the 60s game show, the sort of father knows best, leave it to Beaver segments. I still think of the three women who sort of do versions of Julia Child talking about you can't say pregnancy on TV in the 1950s and 60s.
That's right. Yeah.
Enceinte, or however it's pronounced in French. Anyway, there we go.
Yes, it was Lucille Ball actually said it. So we bring that actually into the play. That was how Lucille Ball dealt with her own pregnancy on her show, which was amazing. So
it's just a really lovely combination of theatricality and intimacy, and I do hope that once the pandemic lifts, that we're able to come back to that script, because again, it feels like a story that's important to be telling because it's about somebody who changed the world in a
Mhm.
very profound and good way. And I just feel like we're going to need that. I feel like we're going to need so much healing over so many things.
Yeah.
How do we continue to bridge the issue of systemic racism in this country, misogyny in this country, that I feel like we've really been kind of doubling down on misogyny in this country in the last few years.
Seems like lately.
Yeah. So I just think it's like when we get into 2021 and beyond, as this pandemic lifts, and it will,
Mhm.
how we start embracing these stories. And I want the Phoenix to really be key in Indianapolis and creating an environment which we can start bridging some of these traumas and moving forward productively.
Mhm.
And we mentioned this the last time we talked, and unfortunately we had problems with that
Yeah.
recording. That's why we're doing it again. You talked about there are studies that show that audiences breathe sort of in sync
Mhm.
with the show. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's really fascinating, and I was really intrigued by it when we last spoke.
Yeah, there's I've read a number of different articles. There was a research project that actually happened in England, I believe, and I'll send you a link to it. But they have done studies that human heart rates will synchronize when groups of people are in a space together experiencing a story together. And that's true. One of the reasons for that is because not only is there this sort of, common sense of energy together, but also you're breathing together and you're kind of engaged in the same sort of rhythmic experience of the show on stage. And with my students, a lot, I talk about rhythm, because words are a type of music, regardless of whether there's music behind them in a musical, or it's whether it's just, beautiful words by themselves. They are a type of music.
Yeah.
And whether an audience knows they're doing it or not, right, when they're in that space, in that moment together, they are searching. They're searching for meaning, they're searching for connection, and it's this sort of innate thing that they do. And so just the very act of human beings being in the same space, watching the same experience, it can be physically transforming to people, right? And as an artist, you only have a certain amount of control over what that response is, right? But you need to be incredibly aware that that response happens, because it's what the audience then brings into the process, right? Playwrights, I say this all the time, playwrights can't write lofty ideas, right? All we do is we write dialogue and stage directions. That's it, right? So
Yes.
within the dialogue, within the stage directions, then where are the places that you want your audience to go, and you need to make those possible. You can't force them there, but by God, you can clear the way, right? And
Yep.
they will go, and then there's this sort of beautiful connection that happens in the middle, in this liminal space in between. So I love that. That's probably, if you were to ask me why I do theater primarily, I think it's that. It's just that feeling that you get that is so hard to articulate, but when you're there, it, right? And then you enter a space changed,
Yeah.
and it's a physical transformation, a mental transformation, emotional transformation. You enter a space and you leave the space changed.
Yeah.
And maybe it's small, maybe it's tiny, maybe it's not, maybe it's huge,
Yeah, I can
right?
think of some of my favorite theater experiences, and some have been the entire show, and
Yeah,
some of them have been moments. And I remember
right.
seeing Jennifer Ely in a play in New York. It was a Stoppard play, and a lot of people know her from the miniseries Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth,
Mhm.
that like 15, and her mother is Rosemary Harris. So it's no surprise that Jennifer Ely is a wonderful actor, and she shows up in things from time to time. But anyway, I remember seeing her in the Stoppard play in New York, and the rest of the production, the women actually were quite good. She was the best, and Amy Irving and Martha Plimpton were in it, and they were really lovely. But I remember there was a moment where her character was playing a piano, and the man she was in love with, and he didn't know she was in love with him, sat down next to her at the piano, and you could just feel her in the back of the Vivian Beaumont Theater at Lincoln Center. And I remember that. I thought, well, the rest of this play I think I hate, but this moment, her performance, and actually all the women, was just amazing. And
Yeah.
remember thinking, that's it. I now, as you say, I bet all of us were breathing in sync in that
Mhm.
moment, because you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah,
You could hear a
yeah.
pin drop in that big Broadway house.
I saw a production of a play by Carol Churchill
Yeah.
called Light Shining in Buckinghamshire.
Uh-huh.
And I think I need to look at the script again. I think it might be an adaptation or an update of a much earlier play. It's an older story. Um, and there was this beautiful production, this huge grand production at the National Theatre. And I had the opportunity to see it in London. This was in 2016. And it had this lovely combination of actual community members. Like they brought in this group of folks from a community center playing some of the chorus. And I will never forget this as long as I live. The entire first act of the play was on this wooden platform, right? This raised wooden platform, and they used it beautifully. And it was beautifully creative, because at one point this massive platform was like a big dining table, and then some other things, and they walked across it, and it was they used it beautifully. At the beginning of the second act, right, the chorus is singing, and one of them walks down stage with a shovel and goes down to the far end and slams the shovel through the deck of the stage, pries open a massive piece of wood, and it's dirt underneath. So then the entire chorus comes through and they start doing the same thing. So they're ripping the wood off of the top of the stage, and now you've got this dirt stage, right? And then halfway through the second act, it starts raining. So the actors are performing in mud. And I'm just, by the end of it, I was so thrilled. I was like cackling in my seat, just because those things were so surprising, right? And when
Yes.
when he
Yeah.
slammed the shovel through the wood,
Mhm.
everybody in my row was like, oh, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that stuff. I actually, the best show I ever saw in Broadway was actually Slava's Snow Show, and it's not a straight musical. It's a Russian clowning show, and it was amazing. And at the end, I mean, and if you've ever seen Russian clowning, it is so precise. It's
oh
not
yeah, yeah.
American clowning, right? So it's obviously a very studied art form. And at one point, I assume with Slava, the lead clown, it's Wagner's, what is it, Thus Spoke Zarathustra,
Uh-huh,
whatever.
uh-huh.
Okay. So he is holding on to a pipe, and the upstage cyc raises, and these wind turbines start blowing fake snow out over the audience. And it's so hard, the wind is so that the clown is holding on to the rail, and he's horizontal with the stage, and all this stuff is blowing out over the audience. Because I remember going into the theater, and I forget which one it was. It was I can't remember what theater it was. And I remember thinking in the lobby, I'm like, God, what's all this fake snow all over? Well, of course, that thing is blowing snow
Yeah, that's
into
amazing.
the lobby, into every crevice in the building. But to this day, I saw that show, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, and I still could just remember like what an overwhelmingly profound experience it was.
Yeah. Have you seen any theater since the pandemic started?
I saw a staged reading that Summit Performance Indianapolis did of a play called Helen, which is inspired
Mm-hmm.
by Troy. I saw that at the amphitheater at Marion University,
Mm-hmm.
and that was lovely to be out there with, and a lot of people in the audience were from the theater community. I saw a one-person show. Gail Payne
Mm-hmm.
did a one-woman show in her backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Lori Hudson of the New Harmony Project had
Yeah.
directed.
Yes,
Or
I
Grounded.
read about that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I saw that. And I went and saw a Butler University piece, Lafcadio. It's adapted from the Maurice Sendak version of Lafcadio that was directed by one of the faculty members at Butler, and it was at Christian Theological Seminary's Shelton Auditorium, where the Edivine Repertory Theater used to work from.
Yes.
The first time I'd seen theater there since the Edivine was there, so that's been over
Wow.
20 years.
Yes.
That was a profound experience to be in that, and the students, and they were all masked, and I was really impressed because they were acting through the masks, and vocally they were full, and I could hear them. We were socially distanced in that beautiful theater, but those three things I think are my only
Yeah.
foray live theater, and each one of them has been meaningful in a particular way, whether it was an artist taking a real risk and pushing her boundaries, or supporting college students getting back to it.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I've been in a little bit more of a frustrating place because I haven't been able to see anything live because of my family situation, because I live with a high risk individual. So we've been very diligent about, following the rules and being
kudos
super,
to
super
you, because it's
careful.
not easy. Yeah, really
Yeah,
kudos to you, 'cause
it's
it's not
been
easy.
rough. It's been rough because, again, because of, I think, some of the differing perspectives of people, and it again reminds me over and over again that we're all in this together, and it's very hard to. I am so grateful for people who are sort of making it work and doing what they can, and the people who have to go to work, the people who are students, for example, where time is of the essence. We've been doing we did a production of the Children's Hour
Oh,
last week. Yeah, and it was in our university theater, again, socially distanced, following the rules, mask, the whole thing. And those students got what I hope is a wonderful experience. Same thing, we're doing She Kills Monsters online, so we're doing the virtual version
wow.
of a awesome play, so I can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah, I
again
read
we're
that. I read a draft of that or something
yeah.
when we
Yeah,
were.
well, there's the play She Kills Monsters, which I've loved since I first read it, and then he did a virtual version of it because it's about
Oh,
gaming, and he was actually able to take the action of the play and move it towards a virtual realm. So that's what it's called. So that will be super fun. I'm
that's
very much
awesome.
looking forward to that.
And lovely. Thank you so much for doing this yet again with me since our first.
Hey, I'll do it a third time. I hope that, I hope technically this works. Doing it at home, the last one, from a video perspective, I was in front of a window, so that might have been a
No, I
who
think it
knows?
was that it just didn't record very well. I've been watching my little recording icon, and it seems like this one is doing quite well. So I
Okay,
think we got this one in the can.
I
Uh,
hope.
yes.
Again, I don't care. I'll talk to you for another hour just because you can call me and say, hey, let's get together. I need to do this again. And we can pretend to record and not. I don't care.
Well, I suspect you and I are going to be having a conversation in early 2021 about Predictor and when that materializes, because is
It's exciting to me. I'm so heartened by that because you and the others who had signed on to the role are sort of all at the same place. We had a chance to connect with some of the other theaters and Florida studio, and then
mhm.
out in Sacramento and all of that, and they're all still very interested. I know Anna's still very interested at 16th Street. So
Yes.
I'm hoping that, again, it's just a great pause, right? And it'll look different than we thought it would look when it comes back. But
Yeah.
I'm heartened and grateful for that. And
Yeah, so let's continue to talk, and if
yeah,
Brian wants to reach out and just touch base with me on it as well, no, probably through Thanksgiving we're going to be a little busy getting our
oh yeah,
ducks in a row for some other things, but certainly in December or January, certainly January. But if Brian wanted to reach out to me in December just to touch base too, that's fine as well.
awesome. All right.
All right, my friend. Well, keep up the good work at Ball State. I also just want to say for the record, while we're still recording, that I just have to say, I just think that Ball State theater program is one of the most vital and dynamic theater programs we have going on in Indiana.
Uh,
There's just an energy when I was there a year or so ago to do generals, working with you and Eva Patton and Andre Gardner and Tom Horan, of course, and just so many people in that department. Um, and the students, you can just tell they have a belief in them, because they have a belief in themselves because you have a belief in them, and that goes a really long way, I think, to instilling confidence in theater artists. So just kudos to all of you up there, and
thank
for, of course,
you.
Bill Jenkins for leading the way there.
Yeah,
So,
we the mission of the department, and this has not changed in the 18 years I've been there. I mean, we developed it when we first got there, and we want to teach good people. We
yeah,
want to teach people that you want to be in a room with, right?
yes,
And the process is what it is, but there is something about cultivating, I think, the curiosity and the work ethic and the commitment, and as I said earlier when we were talking, the sense of humility of about what we do, right? And the fact that we can do this, and we do this, and we do it with other people, and that's at the core of what we do. So I'm so glad to hear you say that. That just
Yeah.
means so much, because it's not an accident. I mean, it's
Oh no, that is not something, that
yeah,
is something that people have willed into being, but
yeah,
it's evident. And yeah, it's evident. And the diversity, just to see so many young theater artists of color who are on their way, it just is really, really lovely. So with that, I'm
okay,
really going to bid you adieu, and be well, my friend, and
I
we
will.
will
You do the
remain
same.
in
Okay,
touch this winter.
you bet. All right, mwah.
Bye, my friend.
Bye.